Poor Waitress threw herself in front of a bullet to save a boy, unaware he was the Mafia boss's son. People scurried with umbrellas or tucked collars, hurrying past the shadows that seemed to cling to every corner. Among them moved Alara, a young waitress with tired eyes and a heart too heavy for her small, modest life. She had learned early that the world was rarely gentle, and yet she held a secret, unshakable hope that somewhere beyond the grime and the cold, there existed something extraordinary. Alara's small apartment smelled of damp wood and old curtains. Her life was simple: serve tables, earn her wages, and return to the quiet solitude of her rooms. She had no family to call her own, no one to wait up for her at night. But she didn't mind the loneliness. It had become her companion, quiet and predictable. What she longed for was not wealth or fame, but a spark, a glimpse of a life that made the drudgery worth enduring. That evening, the rain had begun earlier than expected. She hurried from the diner, the smell of hot coffee and fried bread still clinging to her apron. Her steps echoed in the empty streets as she passed shuttered shops and narrow alleys. The city was alive in ways most people didn't see. The murmurs of power in backrooms, the silent deals made under flickering street lamps, the danger that always lurked behind beauty. Alara didn't notice those things. She only noticed the boy ahead, stumbling through the rain, clutching something close to his chest. Something in her chest tightened, a silent alarm she couldn't explain. She didn't know the boy, but she knew, instinctively, that he was in danger. The sound of a sharp metallic click made her heart leap. A gunshot rang out, echoing across the alley. Time slowed. Alara saw the flash of metal aimed at the boy, the cruel intent in the shooter's eyes, and without thinking, she threw herself forward. Pain exploded in her shoulder as the bullet grazed her arm, but she didn't feel it. All she felt was the surge of adrenaline, the need to shield him from the storm of violence. The boy cried out in shock, stumbling back into her arms, soaked and shivering, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. "Are you okay?" she gasped, pressing herself to him instinctively. He looked down at her, wide-eyed, drenched and trembling. His hands shook as he realized what had just happened. I don't thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding rain. Alara managed a shaky smile, her chest heaving. "Don't thank me, just get out of here." But the danger wasn't gone. From the shadows, footsteps approached, fast, purposeful, and ruthless. Alara dragged the boy further into a narrower alley, trying to find a place to hide. Her mind raced, thinking of every possible escape route, every doorway or shadow that could conceal them. Finally, they ducked behind a stack of crates. The boy's name, she realized, she didn't even know. "You need to tell me your name," she said, her voice trembling. "Lucian," he replied quietly, almost reluctantly, as if saying it aloud made him vulnerable. Alara nodded. "Lucian, I'm Alara. You have to trust me. We need to stay quiet until the danger passes." Lucian's eyes darted around, searching for any sign of the gunman. Then, in a trembling voice, he asked, "Why did you do that? Why risk yourself for me?" Alara's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't know why, not really. She only knew that in that moment something inside her had demanded action. "Because someone has to care," she whispered. For a moment, Lucian stared at her, a storm of emotions crossing his face. Fear, confusion, awe, and something deeper, almost admiration. "You're incredible," he murmured. The alley seemed to grow colder as they waited, listening to the faint retreat of footsteps. Finally, the threat disappeared, leaving only the sound of the rain, relentless and unforgiving. Alara helped Lucian to his feet, though her arm throbbed from the bullet graze. "Can you walk?" she asked. He nodded, though he stumbled slightly. "I think so." They moved slowly, cautiously, toward a safer street. Alara kept her senses sharp, alert to every movement, every shadow. Lucian stayed close to her side, silent but tense, as if he could feel the danger had not entirely passed. As they reached a small bridge overlooking the dark waters of the canal, Lucian finally spoke. "You saved me. Do you know who I am? Alara stopped, puzzled. I don't think I've ever seen you before. His gaze darkened, clouded with a mixture of pride and fear. I'm the son of someone very powerful, dangerous. If anyone finds out you helped me, it could put you in danger. Alara swallowed, her stomach tightening. I don't care who you are. I saw someone in trouble and I acted. That's all. Lucian studied her, his sharp eyes softening with a hint of vulnerability. You're not afraid, she shrugged, wet hair clinging to her face. Afraid is something you learn to ignore. It doesn't mean you stop caring. They reached a small, dimly lit cafe that was still open despite the late hour. The owner, an old man with a kind face, gave them a wary glance but didn't question their wet, disheveled appearance. Alara led Lucian inside, helping him sit on a chair as she tried to tend to his damp clothes and shivering frame. Lucian finally allowed himself to relax slightly, though tension still lined his posture. I don't know how to thank you, he said quietly. Alara shook her head. You don't need to, just be careful. That bullet, it could have killed you. He looked down, a shadow crossing his features. I've lived with danger all my life. I never expected someone like you to risk yourself for me. Her heart skipped, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. Maybe you just need to believe that someone can care without reason. The night passed slowly. They shared quiet moments, sipping hot tea and watching the rain blur the city lights outside. Neither spoke of the future, the impossible, or the power Lucian held within his family. For now, it was enough to exist in that small bubble of safety. But as the first light of dawn touched the wet rooftops, a sense of unease crept into Alara's mind. She had saved him, yes, but in doing so had she sealed her own fate. A chill ran down her spine, unshakable. Lucian, too, felt the weight of the night pressing down on him. Gratitude warred with fear, admiration with a gnawing sense of danger. He wanted to protect her, to keep her close, but he knew that his life was a cage of shadows, and anyone close to him risked being consumed by it. When she finally left him, walking back toward her own modest apartment, Alara couldn't shake the feeling that the city itself was watching her, that some unseen force had noticed her courage and was now waiting for the moment to repay the balance of fate. That night, Alara dreamed of shadows with faces she did not recognize, whispering in voices both terrible and sorrowful. She woke with the taste of rain on her lips and the ache of longing in her heart, longing not just for adventure, but for something she could not yet name. Lucian, alone in his mansion, sat by the window, staring at the storm-soaked streets below. He could not stop thinking of Alara, the girl who had thrown herself into danger without hesitation, whose eyes had held the same fire he had only ever glimpsed in mirrors of noble houses and forbidden dreams. He did not know what the future held, but he knew one truth. He could not allow her to face the coming storm alone. And so, in the quiet before dawn, two lives became bound by a single act of courage, a bond neither fully understood, but one that would set the wheels of fate turning in ways they could never have imagined. Because in the shadows of the city, beyond the rain and neon, something ancient stirred, something that had been waiting for someone to act, someone to choose love over fear. And by saving Lucian, Alara had not only saved a boy, she had awakened a destiny that would reach far beyond her understanding. The first part of their story had ended with a whisper. The city had taken notice, and the night was far from over. The morning sun broke through the clouds in thin streaks, painting the city in pale gold. Yet despite the light, the alleys still held shadows, and Alara could not shake the feeling of unease. She returned to her small apartment, dripping from the rain-soaked streets, her mind restless. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to make breakfast, though her thoughts were miles away, still caught in the memory of the night before. Lucian's face haunted her, the way his eyes had widened in fear, then softened with gratitude, and finally, the subtle fire she had glimpsed beneath his calm exterior. Who was this boy whose presence felt both dangerous and magnetic? Meanwhile, Lucian's world was far different from hers. His mansion loomed over the city like a silent sentinel, a fortress of marble and shadow. The halls were grand but cold, echoing with the absence of warmth. Servants moved quietly, and guards watched every corner. Here, power was measured in whispers, threats, and the sway of the family name. Lucian stood by the window, staring at the streets below. He thought of Alara constantly, the girl who had thrown herself in front of a bullet to save him. Gratitude battled with fear. He wanted to protect her, yet he knew the dangers of his world could crush her like a fragile flower. He could not stay away. That afternoon, he found himself walking through the rain-slicked streets, seeking her apartment. Each step was weighted with anxiety and hope. He didn't knock at the door immediately. Instead, he lingered in the shadowed corridor, watching the small windows, waiting for a sign of her. When Alara finally opened the door, she blinked in surprise. "Lucian, what are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," he said simply. His voice was quiet, but there was a tension beneath it that made her heart skip. I wanted to make sure you were safe after last night." Alara hesitated. She wanted to say that she was fine, that everything was normal. But she could not lie to someone who had risked so much for her. "I'm fine, mostly," she admitted, "though I keep thinking, what if it happens again?" Lucian's eyes softened. "It won't," he said firmly, though even he doubted it. "I'll make sure you're never in danger again. I promise." She studied him, noticing the rare vulnerability in his face. You shouldn't risk yourself for me," she said quietly. "I'm just a waitress. I don't belong in your world." Lucian shook his head. "You belong wherever courage exists," he said, almost with a whisper. "You've already done more than most people would dare. That is why I am here, because you matter." Alara felt warmth rise in her chest, a strange and unfamiliar feeling. It was both thrilling and frightening. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling. "You don't have to say anything," Lucian replied, offering a small, sincere smile. "Just stay close, for now." Days passed, and with each one, Alara found herself drawn deeper into Lucian's world. He did not bring her into the dangerous parts of his family's affairs, but he did show her fragments of his life. The quiet gardens hidden behind tall gates, the library filled with books that smelled of parchment and secrets, and the ballroom where sunlight danced across. Polished floors. Alara marveled at the contrast between her modest life and his opulence. Yet she also saw something darker in it, a weight, a responsibility, a power that could crush anyone who stood too close. She realized that Lucian was not just a boy. He was a symbol of a world she had never imagined, a world filled with both beauty and peril. One evening, they wandered through the garden, rain-drenched and smelling of wet earth. The flowers bowed under the droplets, petals glistening in the dim light. Lucian reached for her hand, tentative, as if afraid she might reject him. "Alara," he whispered, I can't explain why I feel this way, but I can't stop thinking about you. About your courage, your heart. It's different from everything I know." Alara looked down at their hands, brushing her thumb against his. "Lucian, you are not like anyone I have ever met either," she said softly. "You have power, yes, but also something more, something kind." Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The city, the rain, the shadows, all faded into the background. It was just the two of them, connected by something fragile and profound. But the peace did not last. A whisper of danger returned, carried on the wind like a cold warning. Alara began noticing strange events, shadows that lingered longer than they should, fleeting glimpses of figures watching her, and a sense that the world itself was taking note of her involvement with Lucian. One evening, as they returned from the garden, a hooded figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking their path. Lucian instinctively moved in front of Alara, his body tense, ready to defend her. "You shouldn't meddle in things you don't understand," the figure said in a low, eerie voice. She is not just any girl, and you, Lucian, have crossed boundaries that should not be crossed." Lucian frowned, though his hand never left hers. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady but cold. The figure's hood fell back, revealing eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. "I am a messenger," they said, "and this is a warning. By saving him, you have bound your fate to his, and that bond is not easily broken." Alara's stomach dropped. "Bound my fate?" she asked, voice trembling. The figure nodded. "Every act of courage leaves a mark. Yours has awakened something older, stronger, something that may follow you both. Be careful where your hearts lead, for the consequences are not yours alone." With that, the figure vanished into the shadows, leaving Alara and Lucian standing in the garden, drenched in silence and fear. Lucian turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I don't know what that means, but we'll face it together," he said, gripping her hand tightly. Alara nodded, though a chill ran down her spine. She had acted on instinct, on courage, not realizing that her actions had consequences far beyond what she could see. And now she felt as though the threads of fate were weaving their lives together in ways that neither could escape. Over the next few days, the tension between them grew, subtle and unspoken. Their hands brushed when they passed objects, their eyes lingered on each other longer than necessary, and every word carried a weight of meaning neither dared to voice aloud. One evening, Lucian invited Alara to the top balcony of the mansion. The city spread below them like a glittering ocean of lights, the rain having washed the streets clean. "Alara," he said softly, "I need to tell you something. I don't know how this will sound, but you've changed me. Last week, you've made me see a life I didn't know existed. I can't stop thinking about you." Alara felt her heart race. She wanted to reach for him, to tell him that she felt the same, but fear held her back. "Lucian, I feel it too. But your world is dangerous. I don't want to be part of that if it will bring harm to either of us." He took her hand, pressing it to his chest. "I know, but life is not meant to be safe all the time. Sometimes, we have to take risks for what we truly care about." A long silence followed. They stood together, looking at the city, at the rain-soaked streets, at the world that had brought them together. Neither spoke, but the connection between them was palpable, an unspoken promise that they would face whatever came next together. But fate was not done with them. That night, as Alara slept in her small apartment, shadows moved silently through the streets. A letter, sealed with a dark wax emblem, appeared at her door. She awoke to find it, the paper trembling in her hands. The message was simple yet chilling. "The bond you share with him is not yours to choose. The shadows have noticed. Be ready, for the night is coming." Alara's hands shook as she read the words. She realized that the world she had stepped into was far larger, far darker than she had imagined. Her courage had set a chain of events into motion, events that would test both her heart and her soul. Lucian, in his mansion, received similar warnings. Whispers in the halls, servants who spoke of shadows, messages left anonymously. Everything pointed to the same truth. Their bond, born from a single act of bravery, had awakened forces older and stronger than either of them could understand. And yet, despite the fear, despite the unknown, they both knew one thing clearly: they could not face it alone. Because courage, once awakened, demanded loyalty, trust, and a willingness to stand against the darkness together. The city had grown quiet in the nights after the rain, but the silence was not peaceful. Shadows lingered longer than they should, and even in the brightest streets, a sense of unseen eyes watching persisted. Alara felt it everywhere she went, the feeling that something ancient and powerful had noticed her, the girl who had thrown herself into danger without hesitation. She could not stop thinking of Lucian. His dark eyes, so full of unspoken pain and courage, haunted her dreams. But their moments together were fleeting now. Every day she feared that something, or someone, was waiting to strike, a reminder that her choice to save him had consequences she could not yet understand. Lucian, too, was restless. The mansion, normally a place of strict order and quiet authority, had become a prison of whispered warnings and mysterious threats. Servants avoided certain rooms, shadows seemed to move of their own accord, and letters with cryptic messages appeared on his desk. He had tried to shield Ilara from these dangers, but he knew it was impossible. The bond between them, stronger than either could deny, had drawn her into his world, whether she wanted it or not. One evening, as dusk fell, Lucian sent for Ilara to meet him in the hidden garden at the back of the mansion. The air was damp with the smell of wet earth and roses. Lanterns cast soft light over the cobblestones, creating an almost magical glow. Ilara walked cautiously, her heart racing as she approached. Lucian was already there, waiting by the fountain, his hands resting lightly on the edge. He looked up as she arrived, a shadow of worry on his face. "Ilara, you shouldn't be here," he said softly. I need to be," she replied. "I need to know what is happening to us. Why do I feel like something is following me, always watching?" Lucian sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's because you've become part of my world. That night when you saved me, it set something in motion, something old, something powerful. The bond you share with me, it's not just a feeling. It is a connection that has awakened forces beyond our control." Ilara's eyes widened. "Forces? What kind of forces?" He hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "Supernatural forces, shadows that move with a will of their own, messages from those who have long watched my family. They see you now, Ilara, and they will not let this go easily." Ilara shivered. "So, saving you has put me in danger." Lucian nodded. "Yes, but it also gives you strength. That courage of yours, that heart, it has awakened something in you as well, something that can fight back if we are careful." She looked down at her hands, trembling slightly. "I don't know if I'm ready for this." "You don't have to be ready," he said, stepping closer. "You only have to stand with me. Together we can face it." They moved through the garden in silence, their hands brushing occasionally, sending sparks of warmth through the cold night air. There was a tension between them, an unspoken longing that neither could fully name. The world outside might be full of shadows, but here, in these moments, there was only them. Days passed, and Ilara began to notice changes in herself. Small things at first. A whisper of movement at the corner of her vision, the feeling of being guided when danger approached, the sudden clarity in moments of fear. She did not understand it fully, but she knew it was connected to the bond with Lucian. One evening, as they sat in the hidden library of the mansion, Lucian showed her an ancient book with worn pages and strange symbols. "This belonged to my father's ancestors," he said. "It speaks of the bond of courage, of those who risk themselves for others. It warns that such bonds awaken forces beyond control, but it also tells of a path to balance if one is willing to face the darkness." Ilara traced her fingers over the symbols, feeling a strange warmth. "So, saving you has given me this." "Yes," Lucian said softly. "And it has made you a part of something much larger than either of us, but we must be careful. If the wrong people or the wrong forces notice too much, it could consume us both." Their training, as Lucian called it, began in small steps. He taught her how to sense danger, how to trust her instincts, and how to move quietly through spaces where shadows might hide more than just darkness. She learned quickly, her courage and determination surprising even him. Yet the more she learned, the more aware she became of the risks. Every corner held potential danger, every shadow a possible threat. And yet, in spite of the fear, she could not resist the pull toward Lucian. One night, a messenger arrived at the mansion, carrying a sealed envelope. Lucian opened it carefully, his eyes narrowing as he read the contents. "It's from my father's old allies," he said quietly. "They know about us, about you. They warn that interference in my life, by you could have consequences beyond our understanding." Ilara felt her heart pound. "Consequences like what?" Lucian shook his head. "I don't know yet, but we must prepare. The forces awakened by your courage, they are stirring. And soon we may face them directly. The days that followed were tense. Shadows seemed to move with purpose, and whispers echoed through the halls of the mansion. Servants spoke in hushed tones, avoiding certain rooms. And yet, amidst the fear, there were moments of beauty, small, fleeting moments where Alara and Lucian could simply be themselves. One afternoon, they walked along the balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, casting the streets in shades of gold and red. Lucian took her hand, holding it tightly. "Alara," he said softly, "I know this is dangerous, I know it's frightening, but I can't imagine facing it without you." She looked up at him, her heart aching with both fear and longing. "Lucian, I feel the same, but what if we fail?" "Then we fail together," he replied, a small, wry smile touching his lips. "But I believe we will not fail, not as long as we trust each other." Trust became their anchor. Even as shadows lengthened and unseen threats crept closer, they clung to the bond formed in that alleyway, the bond born from courage and selflessness. Every brush of hands, every shared glance deepened their connection, making it stronger, more resilient against the world's dangers. But fate had not finished testing them. One evening, as the sky darkened and a storm approached, Lucian received a call from his father. The voice on the other end was stern, commanding, filled with a cold authority that made Lucian's chest tighten. "There is a matter you must attend to immediately," his father said, "and you will bring her with you." Alara's stomach sank. "Me? Why?" Lucian's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of apology and determination. "Because, the shadows, the bond, it all involves you now. I cannot face this alone. I need you by my side." The next hours were a blur. They traveled through the city, moving carefully, avoiding the usual streets and alleys. The air grew colder, and the storm broke with fierce wind and rain. They finally arrived at an ancient, crumbling temple on the outskirts of the city. Inside, the air was thick with history and something darker, an energy that made the hair on Alara's arms stand on end. Symbols etched into the walls glowed faintly, pulsating with a light that seemed alive. Lucian turned to her. "This is where we will face it, whatever it is. And you must be ready." Alara took a deep breath. "I am ready, for you, for us." The temple grew darker as they stepped further inside. Shadows twisted and shifted around them, forming shapes that were almost human. Whispers filled the air, voices speaking in languages Alara could not understand. Fear pressed against her chest, but she clenched her hands, drawing strength from the bond she shared with Lucian. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall and cloaked. Its eyes glowed faintly red, and it spoke in a voice that chilled the blood. "You have awakened the courage of another," it said, "and in doing so you have bound your fates together, but courage alone is not enough. You must prove yourselves or be consumed by the darkness you have stirred." Lucian stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Alara. "We will face whatever comes together," he said, his voice steady and strong. The figure regarded them both, its gaze piercing, then slowly faded back into the shadows. The whispers died down, leaving a silence that was almost heavier than the storm outside. Alara looked at Lucian, her heart racing. "Is it over?" "For now," he said, though even he sounded uncertain. "But this is only the beginning. The bond has awakened something, and we must be ready for the trials ahead." As they left the temple, drenched by the rain and the weight of what had transpired, Alara realized that nothing would ever be the same. Her life, once quiet and ordinary, had been irrevocably changed. And yet, despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, she knew one truth clearly. She would face whatever came next as long as Lucian stood beside her. The city waited below them, unaware of the shadows, the magic, and the bond that now connected them. And somewhere, in the depths of the night, ancient forces stirred, waiting for the moment when courage and love would be tested to their very limits. The city lay beneath a blanket of fog, its streets empty and quiet as if holding its breath for what was to come. Ilara stood at the edge of the mansion's balcony, looking down at the labyrinth of alleys and lantern-lit streets. Her hands were trembling, not from fear alone, but from the weight of what she knew awaited them. Lucian appeared beside her, his dark eyes reflecting the faint light of dawn. "Ilara," he said softly, "today we face the consequence of our courage. The bond has awakened something, something that will not rest until it is tested." Ilara turned to him, feeling the warmth of his presence, the certainty that had always followed him. "I'm ready," she whispered, though her voice carried the tremor of uncertainty. "I don't know what awaits us, but I will not face it alone." Lucian nodded, his hand brushing hers, a silent promise. Together, they descended from the balcony and walked through the mansion, past servants who avoided their eyes, past the shadows that seemed to shift and watch. Their destination was the temple where the supernatural had first made itself known, a place of ancient magic and whispered power. The path was treacherous. Rain had turned the cobblestones slick, and the storm that had been building in the distance now rumbled overhead. Yet Ilara felt a strange calm. Every step with Lucian reinforced the bond that had begun the night she had thrown herself in front of a bullet. Courage had drawn them together, and now it would carry them forward. When they reached the temple, the doors seemed to open of their own accord, revealing a dark interior that pulsed with faint light. Symbols etched into the walls glowed in rhythmic patterns, as if alive, and the air hummed with energy. Shadows twisted across the floor, forming shapes that seemed almost human. A deep voice echoed through the temple. "You have awakened the bond," it said, "and now you must prove yourselves. Only by embracing courage, trust, and sacrifice can you survive what comes next." Lucian stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Ilara. "We face it together," he said firmly. "No force can break the bond we have formed." The shadows surged forward, swirling around them in a tempest of darkness. Ilara felt the air press against her chest, yet she stood tall, drawing on every lesson she had learned, every moment of courage, every instinct, every act of selflessness. Lucian's hand found hers, and they moved as one. The shadows tested them, twisting into illusions of fear, doubts from their past, and visions of what might be lost. Ilara saw herself alone, her life returning to its modest quiet, while Lucian disappeared into a world of cold power and violence. She felt the pang of longing, the ache of not knowing if they could survive together. Lucian saw visions of his father's wrath, the empire collapsing around him, and the potential for destruction if he failed. Each shadow, each illusion sought to separate them, to break the trust and courage that had brought them this far. But they clung to each other, whispering words of reassurance, grounding themselves in their bond. "We are together," Lucian said, his voice cutting through the whispers. "Nothing can take that from us." Ilara's grip tightened. "We are stronger together," she said. "We have faced darkness before. We can face it again." The shadows recoiled slightly, sensing their determination. Then, with a surge of movement, the darkness coalesced into a figure, tall, cloaked, with eyes glowing like molten gold. "The bond is strong," the figure said, "but strength alone is not enough. Sacrifice is required." Lucian stepped forward, his hand still holding Ilara's. "Tell me what we must do," he demanded. The figure's gaze shifted between them. "One must risk everything for the other. Only through selflessness can the darkness be quelled." Ilara's heart pounded. I have already risked everything," she whispered, thinking of the bullet, the danger, the nights she had spent fearing for him. Lucian shook his head slightly. "And I will risk everything as well," he said. "We will face this together, whatever the cost." The figure seemed to study them, then slowly nodded. "Very well, the trial begins." The shadows surged again, more violently this time, forming walls of darkness that closed around them. Lucian and Ilara moved together, stepping in sync, trusting their instincts and each other. The illusions grew more intense, voices of doubt, fears of failure, visions of a life without the other. Alara faltered for a moment, her mind filled with images of what she could lose, but Lucian's hand tightened around hers. "Do not let it take you," he said. "Remember why you are here. Remember us." She drew strength from his words, from the bond they shared. Courage and love became her shield, trust and determination became her sword. Together, they moved through the darkness, breaking the walls of shadow with each step. The final test appeared, a mirror of their deepest fears. In its reflection, Alara saw herself alone, the world around her dark and empty. Lucian was trapped in chains of his father's making, powerless to save her. The reflection whispered, "This is your fate, accept it." Alara's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to bow. "No," she said, her voice ringing through the temple. "This is not my fate, not if we stand together." Lucian joined her, placing his hand over hers. "We create our own fate," he said firmly. "Together." The mirror shattered, the shadows dissipating into thin, silver mist. The temple seemed to breathe, the symbols on the walls glowing brighter before fading into quiet light. They had passed the trial, not through strength alone, but through courage, trust, and the willingness to face the darkness together. Alara sank to the floor, exhausted but smiling. Lucian knelt beside her, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "You were incredible," he whispered. I could not have faced it without you." Alara smiled faintly. "Nor I without you," she said. "I didn't understand at first why I felt so connected to you, but now I do. Our bond is stronger than any shadow, any fear." Lucian reached for her, drawing her into a gentle embrace. "Then we move forward together," he said, "no matter what the world throws at us." As they stepped out of the temple, the first light of dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The city below seemed brighter, the fog lifting, as if acknowledging the victory they had achieved. Yet both knew that life would never be simple again. There would always be challenges, dangers, and shadows seeking to test their courage. But for now, there was victory. For now, there was love, trust, and the knowledge that together they could face anything. Days later, as the city recovered from the storm, Lucian and Alara walked through the streets side by side, blending courage and quiet joy. Their bond was no longer fragile. It had been tempered in darkness and emerged stronger. People noticed the change in Lucian, a lightness in his step, a warmth in his eyes that had not been there before. And Alara carried herself with newfound confidence, aware of the power she held, not just in skill, but in the courage of her heart. Even in the quiet moments, they found joy, small touches, shared smiles, and the comfort of knowing that they would always protect each other. They had faced darkness, seen their fears, and emerged not broken but whole. And as the sun rose higher, casting golden light over the city, Alara realized that her life had transformed completely. She had stepped into danger once, saving a boy she did not know. In doing so, she had discovered courage within herself she never thought existed, and she had found love in the most unexpected place. Lucian looked at her, his eyes reflecting the sunlight and something deeper. "Alara," he said softly, "we have faced the night together. And now we begin a new day together." She smiled, feeling the warmth of his words settle in her heart. "Together," she repeated, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it as one. In the quiet of the city, as life continued below them, two souls stood united, courageous, bound, and ready to meet the future. The shadows might linger, but they no longer held power over them. For the bond born of bravery, trust, and love had proven stronger than any darkness. And so, under the brightening sky, their story of courage and heart reached its first true dawn, a promise that even in a world of shadows, love and bravery could light the way.